Welcome to DMM Downloads. We are podcasting another conversation about DMM between Jeff Crabtree and me, Rudy Rivera. Jeff and I are teamed together in Northern Colorado in a ministry we call DMM NOCO. DMM NOCO is unleashing disciple-making movements in Northern Colorado, and we thought it a good idea to start a podcast as a way to bring awareness and resourcing to ordinary people who are passionate about making multiplying disciple makers in our natural networks. Thanks for joining us in this journey. We hope you get a DMM download from this conversation. Well, hey, Jeff.
Rudy.
It is, I was about to say Tuesday. It's Thursday.
Thursday this week.
Yeah, Thursday, late morning in beautiful Timnath, Colorado, in your basement again.
Second time here. This is a holy place.
It is a holy place. And that's because I've got the boot from my house, our normal recording studio. That's okay. But we're back again, another DMM download. And actually, just a fun story. Got to come here to Jeff's house and meet his son, who's also a podcaster. We had to shout him out sometime, but that's for a different time. Today, we're going to pick up the continuing conversation of engineering a paradigm shift. And you and I have just had some good dialogue here back and forth on this next download that you have for us, Jeff. So take it away.
Yeah, just when you said that engineering a paradigm shift, which we talked about and the impetus for it with the church that I'm working at. But obviously we probably have a number of listeners that are individuals. They're not involved in church or in church positions. So we're not just saying that the engineering a paradigm shift is just in the structure of church. It's just the mindset shift for any follower of Jesus. So, so we started out talking a little bit about the paradigm shift of knowledge focused or knowledge based versus obedience or application based. Then we talked about what we call the gospel of salvation and needing to have a paradigm shift to the gospel of the kingdom. And now I thought we'd go into another paradigm shift, which we would call maybe attractional church life, attractional ministry in the West. Some would call it church as we know it. It could be called legacy. It can be called traditional church. But we'll maybe use the word attractional for the sake of the podcast today. So we think there has to be a paradigm shift from attractional focused ministry to what we would call missional focused. And so we can talk a little bit about that. I'm going to throw it back to you and see if you want to say anything about that before we take a little deeper dive into attractional versus missional mindset or ministry.
Yeah, thanks for throwing it back. I think for me, we haven't talked about this, but I've heard that missional phrase, missional communities, missional mindset. You know, I've heard it for 10, 15 years-ish. I think it still concerns me, one, that we're having to have that conversation.
Good.
But two, okay, even though I've been hearing it, why does it seem like many of us are still perhaps left in the old paradigm, if you will? So you're not, I don't know if you're prepared to speak to that, but you asked me how I respond. That's my response to it. But I'd love to hear you continue to flesh out. What are you trying to say there, Jeff?
Yeah, well, I'll spin off of what you said. You said that an old model or an old paradigm. We just want to say to our listeners again, I want to reemphasize, we're not saying one is obviously good and the other one's bad. There's probably an interplay of both. We're saying, where do you put priority? And so we're saying that we need to move from attractional to missional, that we emphasize or prioritize the missional aspect. So maybe we could go from there and say the attractional is more, we've built ministry to say, come and see. Come and see. Where missional is go and tell. Is there an interplay of both? Yes. But I can tell you from, in a couple months from now, I'll enter my 48th year of full-time ministry.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm just saying that in my lifetime, in my professional ministry career, if we could put it that way, professional calling, I got saved in the late 70s, which was the beginning of the birth of on the backside of the Jesus movement what was called the church growth movement, the church growth era. And so it was like, here's how you need to think to be attractional, to market, to get people in the building. And so that's what I cut my teeth on. And so all my ministry experience, strip everything away. I hate to say this if it offends anybody or myself, is that basically my job was to get people in the building, to keep them in the building.
Yeah.
I hate to say that hurts, because that's not what Jesus calling on any of our lives. But so the shift was basically come and see. We had all the missional language, Great Commission, we're going to be missional. The point being is that kind of got drowned out or got deprioritized, because the next one is attractional, is basically consumer oriented, that we would call, where missional is more contributor to the mission.
Yeah. That's a good distinction.
So anyway, what we're trying to say is that we think the church in the West, not trying to be derogatory, but trying to be evaluator of results. What are we getting for the way that we've ministered the gospel in the last 40, 50, 60 years, is we think there needs to be a paradigm shift from a focus on being attractional to individually and as a church system, to being missional individually and as a church system or program, if we could call it that way. Does that make sense before we go on?
It does. It makes me want to ask this question, so I'll ask it. So let's take it away from like the church level, okay? Even church leader level.
Right, okay.
Okay. Let's put it into the individual who's listening to this podcast, the individual Christian, probably in a traditional church. What's the paradigm? What does a paradigm to missional look like for that person? Not the church at large, but that one person. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, a couple of things it might be is, again, we would take them back to what are you reading, what are you looking on, what's your purpose as a follower of Jesus, and we'd take you back to the Great Commission. So we'd say, are you being trained, equipped? Are you in a setting? Are you in an environment to be trained and equipped to be on mission, to go make disciples in your social network? So I would say, if somebody's listening, not again away from the church structure or leadership, if you were looking for a church in the attractional models, I want to go someplace where they have a really good preacher and they got a fired up band and they're nice and they serve coffee and donuts ahead of time, so I get a little sweet before I go into the church service. So on that level, we want to shift it. I would say, if you're a follower of Jesus out there and you're looking for, quote, a church, I would say, don't look for an attractional church, look for a missional church that when you've gone in there, they say, we're going to train and equip you. We love you enough. God's got a call and a plan. You're to be an ambassador. You're to be a witness. You're to be a follower. You're to be a disciple maker. Hey, here, if you come to our church now, we will train and equip you so that you can do that faithfully. And that's what I would say, you need to look differently at churches. Not attractional, not look for an attractional church, look for a missional church. Does that make sense?
It does. And, it makes me think, and I'm curious what you think of this, but it makes me think, as a follower of Christ, is my practice, as I am missional, as I'm trying to be missional, is my practice to say, come with me to the attraction and go hear from the professional, the pastor. I'm a pastor. In other words, you're in my church and you say, you know what you need? You need to go listen to my pastor talk about the Bible.
Correct. I hear what you're saying.
Paradigm shift.
Right?
No. You have the Bible and you can take that to your natural network. That to me is part of that shift. Do you have a thought on that? Is that fair?
Obviously we talked, I think, the last time how attractional ministry or church as we know it versus DMM, that they're very integrated. So what you've just basically said is, if you're going to be missional, you don't want to necessarily, and it doesn't mean you can't ask them to a church, but it breaks down in that what we're trying to do is plant or embed the good news of Jesus in those social networks, in that lost environment. And so what we call that, if they do it to the attractional, we call that extraction. It's like if you go into the missional space overseas, the point is you don't want to create something and then get somebody to, like if they were Muslim, you don't want to lead them to Christ and then pull them out of that Muslim environment. That's extraction. They don't, they need to live with that gospel inside of that environment. Is that what you're saying and makes sense?
It is, and I'm adding the part. I find, and maybe it's because I'm a pastor, but I find people in my life, church, traditional church Christians, we tend to bring, if we're going to bring people to Jesus, we tend to bring them to the pastor,
or the system, Sunday morning, or church as we know it.
Yeah, it's like bring them to the attraction, and that's the strategy. Just your job, Christian, is go out there and meet people and bring them to the attraction.
Building, right.
And I think the paradigm is, no, your job is to be equipped to go and take the gospel.
Explained very well. And that's what we're trying to say. There needs to be a paradigm shift. Yeah, it makes me think, and I'll try to say this quickly. We had a guy that in a church that I previously pastored who was lived in a mobile home park. And so he kept asking people from the mobile home park to come to the church. And I kept trying to say, no, what we want to do is I want to equip you so that you take the church, if you will, to them. And he was caught in that old paradigm. And after about a year, I just said, how's it going? Does anybody come? Well, you haven't told me. I haven't seen anybody from the trailer park. No, nobody's come. I said, is it time to shift the strategy? Again, but he had so been formed in the old model, he just couldn't see that he was to be the ambassador.
Yeah. Okay, that's really good and helpful. Thanks for clarifying, because I think I was trying to think through that as well. Okay, so kind of landing the plane here in the next couple of minutes. What else do you want to say about engineering and paradigm shift specifically related to this idea that we're speaking about?
Well, again, I think in being a pastor for 40 years before I got involved in the movement, now 47 years in ministry, is I think we need to shift the emphasis and the focus from inside the building, everything being inside the building, to how do we begin to step outside of the building. And I know when I, 5 years ago, began to be more of a practitioner and stepped out my front door to go prayer walk in my neighborhood, I had never done that. I had never done that. That was a huge step just to get outside focus, because I had spent my whole life on the inside. So I think when we're saying engineering a paradigm shift, one of the things is we're trying to move from what we would call Western attractional model church as we know it, to be more missional, to be more Great Commission oriented, to equip people to take the gospel and embed it in their social networks.
Yeah, I agree, and that's really helpful. Do you have any other, phrases? I mean, I know you and I have been talking off camera or off microphone here. It's not this, it's this. So it's not insider, it's outside. It's not consumer, it's being contributor. Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I would just probably say, I think the result, at least what I've seen in my ministry and churches we know at Attractional, we use the word transactional.
Yeah.
So people come to church to get something, not to become something. And in the missional world, we're not asking you transactional. We want it to be transformational, not transactional. We don't want you to get something. We want you to become something.
Last week we said we think all of these paradigm shifts might have some connection.
Integrated.
Yeah, and that makes me think of what you said last week: gospel of salvation, gospel of the kingdom, transactional,
correct,
towards transformational.
Yeah.
Give us something there, Jeff. Do you have a thought on that, on how those connect? Is that as simple as
I would
it
just
says?
Maybe as we land the plane, just again go back to the good old thing: is what's God's heart? And God's heart is that all men to be saved. And so we all need to be on missional because we have God's heart. So whoever's listening, wherever you're at, any place to land the plane would you be willing to just bow your knee and say, God, I want your heart and I want my life to align with your heart, and here I am. Simple prayers like that is what I prayed that got me now 7 years plus on the DMM journey.
Yeah, and that makes me think of Jesus's calling, right? Where he said, "Follow me, and I will make you
Right.
a fisher of men." He will turn you into something.
It really wasn't as transactional as was transformational.
Yeah, it was. Very much transformational. So
I agree.
yeah, thanks, Jeff, for the
Thanks,
download.
Rudy.
Thanks, Jeff, for that engaging download. In DMM, we like to say that disciples are learners. I know I'm learning a lot from my conversations with you, Jeff. From all of us in DMM NOCO, we hope you got a DMM download from the conversation today. Don't forget to leave this podcast a review wherever you are listening online. If you found this conversation helpful, please head over to our site, dmmnoco.com, where you can find more content for your DMM journey, including a self-paced Habits of a Multiplying Disciple course. The course is designed to give you practical next steps to becoming a DMM practitioner and multiplying disciple maker. You can take that course for free at dmmnoco.com. We will be back next week with another engaging DMM download episode. Until then, may you hear from God through His Spirit and take simple steps of obedience in what you hear.